that attention is vital for learning, and in fact, working on your attention, your attentiveness, your ability to attend is one of the most important things you could probably do here. So, whatever that's worth. Danielle, what announcements do we have? We do have a roundtable this afternoon, 4 p.m. Anything else? Yes. Can you guys hear me? Yes. All right. The second announcement is this field trip is coming Saturday. So for those of us who are planning to go to the field trip, please make sure you're at the police station at 9:30. 9:30 sharp at the police station. Remember, you don't have to bring your lunch. It will be on FYE. Good lunch, good food, good field trip. I invite you guys here. Thank you. I will be there too. Sorry, I wasn't here last week, by the way, Mr. Raw. We have today we're continuing our discussion sort of grounded around the new book you're reading, The Brief Wonders Life of Oscar Wilde, around identity issues coming from a number of different perspectives. The perspective today comes from the discipline of sociology, which is what our guest speaker comes with today. He's going to talk to us today about the history of immigration and how immigration figures into the current book. All of us on this continent, even Native Americans, were immigrants originally. No human beings evolved independently on what is now the North American continent. So this question of immigration is not just something that is kind of theoretical and applies to other people. It applies to every single person in this room. So all of us have an immigrant identity. I think that's what Professor Malpica will talk to us today. Dr. Daniel Malpica has his PhD from UCLA in sociology. He's a professor in our Department of Chicano Latino Studies. You know him as your faculty in residence with his awesome family. He does research in the area of migrations from southern lands, and he works a great deal in areas of Latino policy and sociology, the mix of race and labor, the topography of poverty in this country, and much more. He is winner of the coveted SSU Teaching Award in 2010. He's a great guy, an amazing friend of this program. Please give him a huge welcome. Thank you. So I'm really thrilled to be here. I actually get an opportunity to sort of share some of my passion on this specific issue on immigration. I'm an immigrant myself. My mother was an immigrant. And a lot of these things that I'm actually going to be discussing really are important. And I want to mention a couple of things of why it is important and why it matters. One of my good mentors at UCLA would always ask me, so what? So what? So as I'm sort of lecturing and thinking and presenting you with a lot of this information, ask yourself that so what question. And not only in my presentation, but hopefully in many other presentations that you listen to throughout the whole semester. So why is this important? The first reason why this is important is that it really is connected to issues dealing with economic globalization. We live in a globalized society where communication, capital flows, technology, tourism, and trade is going everywhere. Now, we literally are living in a globalized society. And people are also on the move. People are migrating more than ever. This is part of the reason why this matters and why this is important. The second reason why this is important has a lot to do with because immigration is impacting most countries throughout the planet. And specifically, developed countries, the wealthy countries, are being impacted by migration. So literally, legal and undocumented immigration has emerged as a generalized fact. This is a fact that most developed countries have to confront with. Some countries see this as a problem, and others see this as an opportunity. And I want us to sort of be very reflective on that as you're sort of listening to my lecture. How is it that the United States received immigrants today? How is it that the United States has received immigrants of the past? The other reason why immigration is important, and now I'm sort of zeroing in the United States, is that this has transformed the face of the United States. Before the 1960s, when we would talk about issues dealing with race, it was always a binary. It was black and white. Immediately after the 1960s, where we have this new surge of immigration, we start having very important groups from two areas, Asia and Latin America. And what that has produced is that it has diversified this country and this nation. It's not what it used to be. When we're talking about issues dealing with race, literally it's about, yes, blacks and yes, whites, but also Latinos, also Asians. So how do we start having a really good conversation in terms of race when we are actually incorporating the new immigrants? Very, very important. Lastly, immigration is extremely controversial. You probably have heard some of Trump's statements on immigration, on how Trump views Mexicans and Mexican laborers as rapists, as individuals who are taking jobs from working class Americans. So this is very, very controversial, and this is going to be very, very important in the election that's actually coming around the corner. All right, let me talk a little bit about numbers and really emphasize this issue that the United States is being impacted by migration, and specifically Mexican migration. I'll talk much more about that throughout my lecture. But Europe is being impacted. If you've seen the news of late, this is definitely on our first pages. Now, if you listen to the radio, if you watch television, all these refugees going from Africa and the Middle East, and they're going into Europe. Some countries accepting them, some countries not accepting them, but this is the new reality of Europe. How is it that it's actually going to receive all these refugees from a lot of these areas? Asia is also being impacted very significantly by migration. Countries like Japan, countries like China that had never received or seldom had received immigrants are now being impacted significantly by migration. So again, this is a global issue. Here are the numbers that I was sort of referring to. Notice the remarkable increment from 1970 all the way to 2010, this explosion of individuals who are basically on the move. They're basically picking up their stuff and making their home somewhere else, not where they were actually born. And I really want you all to pay attention to this remarkable jump from 1990 to 2005, a 60% increment of migrants who are basically going from one place and now living in a second place. All right, what does this 214 million mean on a global scale? I know it's hard to sort of grasp exactly what this means. I've done this exercise. It's basically 1 out of every 35 people in the world is an immigrant. This is around 3% of the general population. And you might be thinking, well, Professor Malpica, 3% is not much. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Well, it's a big deal for this reason. If we would put in all those 3% in the territory of Brazil, which is the 5th largest country in the world, that's all the folks who are basically migrants. Very, very significant. Let me remind all of you that I'll actually place my PowerPoint on the Moodle site, so you don't have to capture everything. All of this presentation will for sure be on the Meta site. So if I'm sort of moving a little bit on the fast track, don't get frustrated with me. All right, in terms of percentages, in Europe, we're talking about 10% of all those individuals who are living in Europe are basically migrants. Very significant. In the United States in 2011, notice where my information was gathered, we're talking about 13.5. Today, 2015, we're talking around 14%, 15% of all those individuals who are in the United States, legal and illegal, are in fact immigrants. All right. Let me start off by mentioning this in terms of the next couple of slides. Yes, the United States is in the midst of a massive immigration that has changed our nation, but what really is important is this. This same phenomena already occurred 100 years ago. Many of you who are in this classroom are basically a product of that. Your grandparents, perhaps your great-grandparents, were a part of that migration. So this notion that we are being inundated by immigrants today, the same idea, the same discourse was sort of discussed 100 years ago. And one of the most important things that I will try to do throughout my presentation today is establish a comparison between the old immigrants, the European immigrants, and today's immigrants, the Latin American and also Asian immigrants. All right, and I have two basic questions. Here are the two questions. Here I do invite you to write these down. And basically, my first question is this: is history repeating itself? And my answer to that question is yes. We are seeing many similar factors. If we compare it to the past, many similar factors. And the second question is this: is there something new? So capture the last question, the last part of number 2. What is new about the United States immigration today? What stands out? What's unique about the new immigrants vis-a-vis the old immigrants? No? So those are the really key questions that will guide my whole presentation. All right, so let me go over and start making this sort of comparison between the old immigration and the new immigration. When we talk about the old immigrants, we're talking about the European immigrants. We're talking about individuals from Italy. We're talking about individuals from Poland, Greece, and also Russia. Time period, 1840, roughly speaking, all the way to 1920. Let me say more about these European immigrants. When they arrived to the United States, they saw this as the land of opportunity. There was plenty of jobs for them. They were willing to take any type of job. And at the same time, the United States was going through an industrial expansion. There was a lot of jobs. So it was a perfect fit. These workers needed jobs. The United States was producing jobs. It was a perfect marriage. In terms of the class background of these immigrants, for the most part, they were very homogeneous in terms of working class. They weren't rich, they weren't poor, they were working class individuals. As you're thinking about this in terms of the comparison, really pay a lot of attention in terms of the class background of both ways. In terms of race, when European immigrants arrived, many of them were not considered white. So Jews, Italians, Poles, they were considered the other. They were considered an inferior race. They were the Mexicans of today. So raise your hand if you come from Italian or Irish or Jewish background, nice and high. Well, your ancestors were not considered white. They were highly discriminated. And in addition, it was very, very difficult for them to actually adapt and assimilate into the United States. Through time, and you are the perfect example of this, you have assimilated and now you sort of walk through life as white. But when your ancestors arrived, that was not the case. All right, let me show you. Can we see this? Can we see these small numbers? Yes? Okay. So this basically just gives you an idea of the incredible diversity of countries where Europeans were coming, Ireland and Germany, and the list goes on. It also indicates the time period when they were coming, the number, and also the reasons why they were coming. And I hope everybody pays a lot of attention in terms of the numbers. So the two major groups are Germans and Italians. Now, 4 million of them. Imagine this remarkable flooding of the United States and how the nations changed by having this remarkable influence of these new groups. The reasons why they came also are very, very diverse. Some were fleeing religious persecutions. Some were fleeing famines. Some were fleeing for economic reasons. So the reasons also are extremely, extremely diverse. Let me show you a couple of photographs. If you can't see this very well, this is a ship, and basically it's coming to America. And all those things that you could sort of can't make sense of who they are, these are crammed individuals coming with a remarkable hope of landing and being accepted into the United States. Here's Ellis Island, the first point of contact that the European immigrants had. This was taken more or less circa 1900s. And here are just general photographs. So you could get a little taste of what these immigrants looked like, what they were wearing, and what they were sort of wondering as they were stepping into the sort of new land. As I already mentioned, the Germans and Italians were the most important group. And both of these groups were considered that they were not going to assimilate into the United States. They were too foreign. They practiced religions that were very different. And native-born Americans, many of them Anglo-Saxons, believed that these groups were unassimilated, that they would never be able to assimilate into the United States. As I mentioned, these groups were highly discriminated. If you can't see my cartoon very well, and I apologize for the quality, let me sort of go over it. So it reads on one of the corners, danger to American ideas and institutions. And these folks who are swimming into the United States, they're sort of not animal, they're animal looking, you know, they're not human beings. They're very, very dark. I always ask my students in class, I don't have time right now, what do they look like? And they say they're Mexicans. They're not. They're supposedly Italian migrants, no? But the cartoonists depict them as very, very dark, very different from those who were already here. And the title of the cartoon is The High Tide of Immigration, a National Menace. All right, so let me show you this video that captures a little bit of the experience of the immigrants as they were coming into Ellis Island. Can we hear? About the Dominican Republic, it's a relatively small country, but look how significant it figures after these massive countries, no? Places like New York City, it is the #1 immigrant group. It's remarkable. And this is part of the reason why we're reading this novel. It's about capturing what does it mean to live in New Jersey, New York area. The most important immigrant group are, in fact, Dominicans. The time period that we're talking about is 1965 to the present. Let me say more about these immigrants. When they arrived, they also saw the United States as a land of opportunity.
the immigrants were willing to take any type of job. Here, in terms of the economy is very, very different from the old immigrants. The economy has been cyclical, sometimes very robust, sometimes not robust. So as we're thinking about how today's immigrants adapt to the United States, really think about that. What's the kind of economy that the country is actually receiving? In terms of class background, the class background of these immigrants is extremely diverse. Some of these people are middle class. They arrive to places like SFO and JFK and LAX, and they immediately get professional jobs. They have PhDs, master's degrees, and are very, very easily assimilated into the United States. At the same time, we have individuals who come and are illiterate, can't read, can't write even their own language, and they're also living in our midst. So remarkable class differences with the new immigrants. In terms of race, and I'll mention much more about this, also a remarkable diversity. Very, very, very diverse. And also this group has been discriminated quite a bit. All right, notice here, four out of every 5 immigrants in the United States today is coming from these regions, Latin America, Asia, and also the Caribbean. One of the really important characteristics today of the new immigrants is this notion of being undocumented. 100 years ago, European immigrants did not have to deal with this. As you saw in the video, if you were healthy, you had a little bit of money, you were basically permitted to come into the United States. Today, things have changed dramatically. That is not the case with the immigration policies that we have today. Today, it is very difficult to come to the United States. To get, for example, an immigrant visa is very, very difficult. Even if you have a family member in the United States, for you to get a visa to work and living in the United States, it's very, very complicated. So let me give you a couple of examples. In 2012, a US citizen wanting to sponsor an unmarried adult child from Mexico had to wait around 20 years before the application would be processed. So remarkable, the waiting game that a lot of these families have to do. And again, like I said, a legal permanent resident applying to bring their immediate family members could expect to wait around 3 years, regardless of the country of origin. So as a result, many people basically decide and opt to come to the United States as the so-called illegal immigrants or as undocumented. Today, we're talking about roughly from 11 million to 12 million individuals who are currently living, working in the United States illegally or as undocumented migrants. So let me show you a couple of photographs that sort of capture the new immigrant experience. Here, you see this photograph of people coming from Mexico, and they're going legally into the United States. As I already mentioned, there's a lot of individuals that come here legally through workers' visas, for example. Asian immigrants benefit tremendously from these types of visas. Latin American migrants also benefit from professional visas, but they also are able to come to the United States via family ties. Somebody sponsors, and this family is able to actually come and live to the United States illegally. But that's not the experience of all the new immigrants. Many of them, as I already mentioned, have to come illegally. And this is one of the ways they actually come. So these are a couple of photographs from Donald Barnett, who's a Pulitzer Award winner of photography from the Los Angeles Times. And he won these awards by taking these photographs of these migrants coming all the way from Central America, and they get on top of these trains, Mexican trains, and they go from the southern part of Mexico all the way to the border between Mexico and the United States. Once they arrive, many of them cross the border this way. These were photographs taken during the 1990s in this area of San Diego, Calexico, Mexicali. But this is what that same area looks like today. because of the militarization of the border. Same border, different fence. But what really is remarkable is this. People are still crossing the border. We have built, out of our tax dollars, these remarkable fences, brick, cemented fences, super, super high. Nobody can go through here. But remember, migrants are really resilient, and they have figured other ways to actually cross. So people are not crossing through California. Now they're actually crossing. This is the same border, the California border. So this sort of stadium-like lighting. But they're crossing now through Arizona. So if you can't make sense of that, that wire, that's the border. One side is in the United States, the other side is Mexico. Notice the photograph on the bottom. Not even nothing, just that little thing indicating one side is the United States, the other side is Mexico. They're going through Arizona. Here's another photograph of Arizona. Of course, notice also the terrain. So we're talking about the desert. And because it's the desert, people are basically dying every day. As we speak, somebody is dying at trying to attempt their crossing through that Mexico-US border. No water, you die. Here's New Mexico. All right, something else that's very particular about the new immigrants is this notion of transnationalism. So many migrants are what we refer to as trans-migrants. A lot of Dominicanos, people from the Dominican Republic, they are trans-migrants, where literally they have both feet on both countries. They live perhaps 6 months in New York City. They live perhaps, the other 6 months in Santo Domingo. Very, very common. And they're going back and forth. But notice what I have here on my slide. It's not only just the movement of people, it's the movement of ideas and practices and resources. So a lot of these migrants living in the East Coast remit. They sent money back to Santo Domingo. And the people who are not migrants receive this money. And they invest in property and goods, and they buy food, etc., etc. And this is the reality of being a Dominicano. Let me give you a perfect example. If you are planning to run for an official government position in the Dominican Republic, you have to go to many different cities. So for example, let's do a hypothetical. You want to run to be a president of the Dominican Republic. At one point, you need to go and visit the East Coast, New Jersey and New York City, in order to sort of lure potential voters. That's how significant it is. So every 4 years, 5 years, you see all these politicians trying to buy the votes of those individuals living in the East Coast. And in fact, in New York, you can actually cast your vote for a presidential election in the Dominican Republic. Few countries you're able to actually do this, and Dominicanos are able to actually do this. All right, we also mentioned earlier this issue of race. Today's immigrants are non-white. And that's very, very important to understanding their process of assimilation. They're Asian, they're mestizos, and they're black or mulatto. Let me give you a couple of examples. These are Dominican teenagers, some of them a little bit younger than you, but this is what they look like. This is what, the sort of phenotype of many Dominicans. Of course, I'm here generalizing, but if you go to New York City or New Jersey and Washington Heights, this is the kind of folks that you would actually encounter. But again, it's not only mulattoes or blacks like these folks, we have Asian and also mestizos. But race becomes paramount. Race becomes very, very important to understanding what does it take to assimilate, to be accepted into the United States if you have this sort of phenotype. As already explained, many immigrants go through a lot of discrimination. And here the cartoon is sort of alluding to some of these issues. So let me show you a video.
It's a mighty long road that my poor hands have hold. My poor feet have traveled a long, dusty road.
Detrás de ese problema hay todo un contexto social que lo acompaña. Y ese contexto social es el que hay que entenderlo y hay que comprenderlo.
Tengo mi esposa, tengo 3 niños.
Tiene que pedirle a Dios que nos guíe en un buen camino, que nos...
Si en el camino me toca morir, pero estoy arriesgándome, pues. Sí.
Yes, and then we come with the dust, and we're gone with the
We
wind.
want them to see our lights, see our fencing.
In the same moment that people have been forced to leave their lands and move, the act of migrating has been criminalized.
See marked border patrol agents everywhere, see agents on bikes, see agents on horseback.
Now, the only way someone can get into the United States is to run what has functionally become a gauntlet of death.
Now a little bit about, and I'm sort of transitioning into the second part of my presentation for today. Why is it that people come? Why is it that people come to the United States? And I want to zero in on Mexican migration, in part because that's the area of specialization. But as I already mentioned, this is the most important number of individuals coming from any part of the world. And let me just give you a couple of kind of interesting statistics about the browning of the United States. For example, Americans now consume more salsa than they do ketchup. Kind of interesting. Jose, the name Jose, is the most important common name used in California children. No, that's the name that appears in many, many certificates in the state of California. I don't know if people have been reading the news of late, but the last couple of months, it has determined by demographers that whites have been now no longer the majority in the state of California. So it's basically a non-white state. And this speaks a lot about the presence of Latin American migrants and also specifically Mexican migrants. All right, the first reason why people come is this wage employment differential. I live in Latin America. I earn Mexico Salvadorian pesos. And if I could go and work in the United States and earn dollars, that's a big attraction. Huge attraction. And that's why a lot of people actually end up leaving their respective countries and they come to the United States. Note this. This is something favored by economists. I'm a sociologist by training. So this explanation, I really don't buy into this one. It for sure matters, but the other explanations that I'm about to deliver to all of you are much more significant, I think, based on my training and my discipline. So let's talk a little bit more about this wage differential. So if you are a Mexican, unskilled or semi-skilled factory worker, and if you work 1 hour, you're going to be paid $1.13. If you do the same type of labor in the United States, roughly speaking, you're going to be earning 11.30 cents. So notice the differential, 10 to 1. Big attraction now. If I could actually get a job where I could get paid 10 times more than I currently do, I'm there. Give me the paper and I'll sign up. And the same thing with skilled factory workers. Notice the differential, $2.79, $16.90. So there's always an important differential. Let me give it a concrete view. Here with agricultural workers. This is a campesino working in Mexico. He would earn around 80 cents per hour. Same task, same labor, $8 here in the United States. So again, this is a big incentive for people to actually pick up their stuff and leave. There's also direct labor recruitment. American companies, U.S. government has historically lured immigrants to come and labor in the United States. They have actively recruited migrants. The case in point is the Bracero program. Perhaps some of you know what this program is about. The United States was fighting a war, World War II. We needed agricultural workers, and we had this pact with Mexico to bring in workers to tend to the fields. By the end of the program, 1964, 4 million individuals had actually visited these farms and worked in the United States. Many of you who are of Mexican descent, I can assure you that you have a grandpa, an auntie, an aunt, or an uncle who actually participated in this program.
Here are more photographs that sort of capture that Bracero experience. Migrant networks are also key and very, very important. I always tell my students, if you are not connected, if you don't have a family member, if you don't have an acquaintance that will invite you to come to the United States, it is very difficult for you to actually make that trek. So let me sort of do this hypothetical with this family. There's a big probability that this man was invited by an uncle, by a brother, to come to the United States. He came by himself, and then later on, the family, the rest of the family trickled in and came to the United States. Particularly undocumented migrants rely heavily on migrant networks. And migrant networks, once the migrant is here, becomes very, very important. It makes people feel at home, but at the same time being away from home. So let me just show you a couple of photographs that capture this. So these are Yucateco migrants living in San Francisco. I go to San Francisco quite a bit, and I hear this language that I don't recognize. I speak Spanish and also English, but these individuals are speaking Maya, no? And that's why I can't make sense of what they're saying, but there's a really important Mayan community in San Francisco, and they have a very nice network process as they're adapting in the United States. Here are some of the photographs from my own research with indigenous Mexicans. These are Mexicans coming from the southern part of Mexico, Oaxaca. And this is a Sweet 16 celebration that I got invited to. It was a really, really great event. They fed us like kings that day. So let me show you just more photographs of these. All right. Another reason why people migrate has a lot to do with organized people smuggling. So we already talked about how difficult it is to actually come into the United States because the border has become militarized. So a lot of people, in order for them to come, they have to depend on a smuggler. Or as a coyote, which is referred to in Spanish, or a snakehead among Asians. A lot of Asians are actually brought in legally also into the United States. Let me show you this map, which I hope you can actually read, which is really, really significant. So notice how much it costs from the Dominican Republic to be smuggled into the United States. $12,000. Remarkable amount of money, no? And of course, I hope everybody's paying attention, you're coming from that Fujian, China area, $60,000 to be smuggled illegally into this country. You might be asking yourself, how can these folks afford this amount of money? Well, they can. The people who are living here, who are the sponsors, a brother, a father, a family member, these are the individuals that are going to pay for this amount. All right, this is the way that people are smuggled. Through land, through sea. I love this photograph. I hope people are able to sort of figure out what's going on here. Here's the border, and they took this X-ray, and they were able to capture all these people being smuggled into the United States. And this occurs on a regular basis. All right, localized culture of immigration is also very, very important. So a way to sort of think about this is this. There's a culture of migration in these areas. And in the Dominican Republic, there's many regions of the Dominican Republic where everybody at one point or another has gone to New Jersey or is planning to go to New Jersey. So there's a culture of migration. Let me illustrate this with the cases that I know very well, which is at the heart of Mexico. This is Jalisco in Mexico. So this guy migrated in the 1960s, long time ago, but now his offspring have also decided to migrate. And here they are. Notice how Americanized these guys are. And lastly, I want to finish off, because I see my two drillers of questions are here. Let me just mention the demand for immigrant labor. This is one of the most important reasons of why people come. There's work for them. Americans need them. Companies need them. And this is not what I'm telling you. This is what the employers are telling us, social scientists. So there's a big demand for immigrant labor. It's a chicken processing plant in Tennessee. In agriculture, I go to Napa on a regular basis, and sometimes I go very early. This is a very
some, construction, very, very important. As day laborers, part of the informal economy. Washing your car, I've noticed much less this here, but in Los Angeles, if you're middle class, middle upper class, nobody washes their car. You have these immigrants who are actually able to actually do it. Had a video that I can't send, but I'll send it to all of your sections. And here I want to sort of finalize my lecture with these two cartoons, and I'll read these for you. The man has an orange there. You should tighten up immigration and kick out all the illegals. How much is this wonderful orange harvested without any nasty immigrant labor? And the cashier responds, $162. And lastly, the man has on his shirt, illegals go home. And he says, I mean after you're done with the hedges. And this is what's so controversial about immigration. Now, we want these thugs, but at the same time, we don't want to set them for them to actually become future Americans. Thank you. All right, so let's listen up, please. A couple of minutes. So how did my answers come to the United States? This time I didn't share this part of my personal history, but my mother was an undocumented migrant at one point. She came and worked in El Paso, Texas for a number of years. She actually has these remarkable stories about eating chili. Not fun. Hands, sometimes with gloves, but as you're picking this product, all the smell of the chili goes up to your nostrils. And it's extremely, extremely difficult labor. She was your age, 17, 18 years old, and that's what she was doing.
This one says, why do you think Mexican individuals find immigration so important that they choose to risk their lives?
That's actually a really good question. I think the dream of the United States is still alive. I see it in my personal story. So as I already shared with all of you, my mother was undocumented. All her life she had working class type of jobs. And now all of a sudden I have a PhD, and I'm sort of middle class. But I'm not doing the same kind of job that my parents are doing. And I think many immigrants have that idea. The future, the hopefulness, and the remarkable opportunities that this country has. And I think that's part of the reason why many people are willing to risk their lives.
The last one says, how many individuals do you think our country can hold until it reaches its potential?
So yeah, that's a really good question. I have this Robert White video, who's actually an economist at Berkeley, who has been talking quite a bit about that specific issue. And something for all of us to sort of consider is this. White population is basically retiring, becoming older individuals, and we need folks to support that white retiring individuals and people who will actually do the work a lot of Americans don't want to do. And I think the moment we realize that there's a big need of working class immigrant laborers who will fill those types of jobs, I think we will do a very important push to sort of solving and thinking and also accepting immigrants. There's a lot of vilifying and demonizing immigrants. But at the same time, many of us, American citizens, and those who have lived in this country don't want to do those jobs. So the Morgan Spurlock video, he's basically picking oranges for a couple of days. And he picks the oranges so slow that he's not even making them into himself. No? And he tells the audience that he's almost certain that no American would be willing to actually take this. And I think that's something that we sort of have to come to grips with. That historically we have needed immigrant laborers, and today it's no different. All right, so thank you very much.